Here we are in front of The First Cloud by William Quiller Orchardson. Ted, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the room that we're seeing it in today.
Well, this is what we call the salon-style gallery. It's on the second floor of NGV International, and it's a room which we set up to evoke the feeling that viewers would have had entering either the Paris Salon or the Royal Academy exhibition each summer in London, where literally thousands of paintings jostle for attention.
Now, Ted, before we go into detail about this painting, can you tell us what your job as a senior curator of international art at the NGV involves?
I and two colleagues in my department, we look after what we call international painting and sculpture. So that is, in the context of our collections, European, British and American painting and sculpture. And we look after the period from 1300 to 1980. We select the works that are being put out on display at any given time, and we prepare the information that interprets them for visitors. There seems to be a real interest now, a renewal of interest among the public to want to know the backstories behind the pictures. And that's what we love. Curators in our roles as historical researchers, we're art detectives.
I can see that you're really lighting up at this point, so I suspect that one of your favourite parts of being a curator is actually investigating and finding out about the backstories.
Absolutely. I love doing historical research, and I love finding out the stories, because the aesthetics, the beauty of the painting, that's absolutely important, of course.
Yes.
But I love to be able to try and value add to that by trying to recreate the world in which the artist made a particular picture.
Yes. Yes.
And try and understand what was going through his or her mind at the moment of creation.
When did you first see this picture, and what impact did it make on you?
I first saw this picture in 1968 when I was 8 years old.
Oh!
And this gallery first opened, so that dates me, I'm afraid. And thereafter, I would come to the gallery once a fortnight with my family, sometimes once a week. And my mother and I in particular, every visit to the gallery right through the 1960s and 70s until I went off to university, we would stop in front of William Quiller Orchardson's The First Cloud and just look at it, and we would admire its beauty, of course. We loved it for its beautiful Victorian elegance, the exquisite way it's painted, the fantastic costume, the still life details, the evocation of a wonderfully rich interior in late Victorian London. But we also used to endlessly speculate on what does the title mean, The First Cloud? What's going on?
You're very well versed on this particular artist. Could you tell us something about him as a person and his life as a painter?
Yes, well, William Quiller Orchardson was born and trained in Scotland, but in 1862 he moved to London. He began to establish a reputation at the Royal Academy for exquisitely painted comedy of manners works. So they would be ladies at a ball, making a faux pas, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And what came out of those early works were two things. One, his great love of clothes and fashion, and the painting of fabrics and details of ribbons and trims and hats. And he established a reputation for doing that to the absolute nth degree of perfection. But also what became clear was his love of texture, and in particular his love of painted floors and painted carpets. He became renowned for his skill at creating the textures of interiors in a really bold new manner, because unlike the clutter that clouded most of the other Victorian narratives in the Royal Academy shows in the 1870s and 1880s, the narrative is clearly defined and set and played off against an almost deceptively empty background.
Can you tell us why he was so interested in creating that space, Ted?
I think he's setting up in the best of his pictures a psychological entity that is created by the flooring, the carpeting and the texture of the walls that we see. Something that's not immediately evident, and it's not meant to be, but it creates a perfect setting and enables us to focus upon the central characters and what's going on.
I mentioned the floor. It sounds as if this artist is particularly keen on painting floors. That must have been quite a challenge, wasn't it?
It was. He loved painting floors and he was exceptionally brilliant at it.
Okay.
For example, he painted the floor in this painting without using a ruler.
Well, do you believe that his paint surface is slightly different from some other painters of his era?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Very thin layers of paint. The oil paint is thinned out with essence and other materials to make it almost like watercolour in there. And it looks like there's just one coat, but there are many, many coats, and he likes to change his mind. He perfects it. He develops the composition as he's going along and is quite happy to redesign, redraw and repaint until it's absolutely perfect.
Could you tell us a little bit about the artist's preferred colour palette?
Absolutely. Well, we're looking at it.
Yes.
And it may seem a contradiction in terms because at first glance it's not a coloured picture really.
Yes.
It's quite monochrome, but in actual fact it's a very clever use of subtle colour such that when colour is there, for example in the floral decorations, in the lampshade, in the tiny details of the woman's dress, it really stands out.
Yes, yes.
So it's a very, very subtle and pulled back sense of colour.
Yes,
yes. Almost autumnal.
Yes.
And then you get these touches of spring. So he's really controlling our eye.
Yes. Could you explain for us what you think might be going on in this picture and how the artist has achieved that meaning?
Well, the painting was exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1887 with the title The First Cloud,
yes.
which suggests a narrative.
Yes, yes.
So we're not looking at still life or portraiture.
Yes.
There's a story here.
Yes.
But it also has attached to it a piece of poetry, remember, that's drawn from Tennyson's Idylls of the Kings.
So this refers back to the Arthurian legends. It's about Vivian and Merlin.
That's right, it's from that poem, and the poem goes...
It is the little rift within the lute that by and by will make the music mute.
Yes. So there, it's not actually illustrating an Arthurian legend.
No.
But the break within the lute will eventually make the music stop happening.
Yes.
So we can infer from that that this is a picture about something cracking and breaking.
Yes.
The music is obviously the marriage.
Yes.
The first cloud is the first argument in this marriage.
Did you want to comment on some of the features that suggest the subject that you think he was trying to evoke?
The first thing we see is there's a couple in a very handsomely appointed drawing room. There's no fire in the grate.
Ah, I see.
So they've either just about to go out or they've just come home from somewhere and they haven't relit the fire.
Yes.
They're not talking to each other, and there's definitely an air of confrontation. And there's a contrast in the two figures. The gentleman who looks extremely angry, possibly regretful, a little bit sad, definitely, I think, confused, and the woman who seems to be quite calm and in control of things as she exits the room. So we have arrived as viewers at this painting just at a moment in which the relationship between this couple has changed. That's the title, The First Cloud.
Of course. Now, I understand that there's a secret about this painting that some people don't know that you have discovered over the years, which might also perhaps communicate further meaning.
Absolutely. And when we put it in for cleaning and restoration in the conservation lab, our painting conservators undertook X-ray and infrared photography of the painting, and when they did the infrared in particular, an extraordinary new version of the painting appeared. And it's quite simple really. We see the husband figure here standing on a small piece of decorated carpet, but in the first version of the painting the carpet goes right across the floor.
Really?
There is no wooden parquetry floor at all. At the last minute, Orchardson has decided to change his composition and reduce the carpeted floor to just one little piece of rug that the husband is standing on. And he then paints over a beautifully intricate wooden parquetry floor.
Yes.
So why would he make this change?
Exactly.
And what's going on?
What's your theory, Ted?
Well, my theory is that it's got to do with introducing another element for us, the viewer.
Okay.
Because what is interesting about this picture is that it's depicting a dramatic moment, but it's totally silent.
Yes.
His decision to remove the carpet and put in a wooden floor brings in two sounds that I think are quite significant for the narrative. The first is the click of her heels on the parquetry floor.
Yes.
And the second is the swish of her silk taffeta dress.
Ah, wonderful, which of course now we can hear so clearly.
When you think about it, that's the last thing that he hears. She's not going to say any more. She said all she's got to say.
Yes.
And the last thing he hears this evening is the click of her heels and the swish of her dress.
I've heard that you talk about this painting sometimes and call it a very synesthetic picture, and you've just described the sound for us. Could you tell us what do you mean by synesthetic, and what, how does it apply to this painting?
Yes, well, artists in the mid to late 19th century, the classic Victorian period, loved the notion of synesthesia, which basically means the combination of all senses in one work of art.
Yes.
So, for example, you would hear a piece of music and see a painting. The 1890s, just a couple of years after this is painted, artists would work with theatre producers and actors to create synesthetic theatre performances in which they would pump perfume into the crowd so that they would get smell as well as sight and sound. Now, it could be argued that by making the change, Quiller Orchardson is introducing a synesthetic element.
Yes.
So if we think of what the senses are, they are sight, sound, touch, taste and smell.
Yes.
Well, sight is everything in the picture, but in particular it's his use of texture. It's the carpet, the parquetry floor, the beautiful velvet curtains, the muted wallpaper background. It's the clothes.
Yes.
Touch is the man's feet on the carpet, the swish of the woman's taffeta dress on the floor, even without the sound. That's a touch, that sense of her dress dragging across the floor. But it's also the touch of the man's hands that are pushed into his jacket in a gesture of frustration and unhappiness. Smell, of course, is the woman's perfume. The fire in the grate, the ashes there, the flowers.
Yes.
Other touches, he might smell of cigars if they've just come from the club.
That builds up such a beautiful sensory picture.
Then we have the sense of taste.
Even taste.
Well, I thought about this for a while and I thought it can't possibly be any taste. But then I thought, well, there is a taste. The sense of this painting is about taste. An argument in a marriage creates bitterness. So there's a bitter taste in both mouths of the participants.
Yes.
Which makes us feel the taste of bitterness looking at it, but also there's the sense of bile rising in the husband's throat, which is a definitely acrid taste that you get when you're angry. So that could be the taste. And perhaps with those elements in place, so he takes away the carpet, puts in the carpentry floor, and you add sound, and you've got the five senses.
The role perhaps of the curtains there and the columns either side of the young woman, and there seems to be a mirror behind. How might you interpret that, Ted?
Well, I think we can interpret that as part of the journey that's being explored in this painting, and I don't think it's an overinterpretation. This is a very carefully constructed painting, and we also know from the X-rays and infrared photography that he changed the positions of the curtains. Originally it was closer to the female figure, and he opens it up at the right to enable her reflection to be seen in the mirror.
Yes.
So he's made another important change that is crucial to the narrative he's presenting. So what we see is the husband isolated, stranded on his little piece of carpet. The parquetry floor belongs to the wife, not to him, and I think that's significant.
Yes.
By placing him just on a small rug in front of the fire, he's stranded him.
Right.
And he can't seem to move from that rug. And this picture is painted some years into the term of William Gladstone, who came in to be a new Prime Minister of Great Britain.
I see. Now this is very interesting, Ted, because it seems to me that perhaps, in view of what you've said, that this could link with perhaps the sort of social conditions of the time and the emerging women's rights movement.
He passed a controversial piece of legislature called the Married Women's Property Act.
Yes.
And this gave married women for the first time in British history the right to retain their own property after they married. Prior to 1882, if a woman married, everything she owned became the property of her husband.
Really?
Only after 1882 could she retain her own money and retain her own house, her own jewels after marriage. So this changes the balance of power between the sexes.
Of course. Could you tell us why you think he was preoccupied with that kind of subject matter? I mean, was his own marriage happy or?
Yes, I mean, I can't speak for the artist myself, but we do know from the biography written by his daughter Hilda that he had a very happy marriage. That wasn't necessarily the case always in Victorian England, particularly amongst the upper classes, where many marriages were arranged
Yes.
for either furthering the wealth or the social status of families on both sides. So he's interested in the other.
Okay.
And the other in his life is a marriage that is not as happy
Sure.
and well balanced as his own.
What do you believe might be the situation between these two characters? Is she a young, beautiful woman, for example, who's married for money, or do you think it could be the other way round? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. When you first look at it, what's apparent is that she's a young woman.
Yes.
She appears to be late teens, early 20s.
Yes.
He's clearly a man in his late 50s. If he holds the balance of power, then he wouldn't look so frustrated, I don't think.
Exactly.
And he's clearly in the losing position.
Absolutely.
And the woman appears to be upright, dominant, confident.
Yes. And I sometimes think that her fist is clenched when I look at it, which might be perhaps another symbol
read
of her.
it that way, yes. And so certainly in the context of a painting exhibited just a few years after the Married Women's Property Act, I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that London audiences could have read this as a commentary on the new shift in power between the two sexes.
Yes.
So, for example, if he has married her for her money and the marriage is now falling apart, he doesn't have any control over her money.
No.
This might explain why he is left isolated and frustrated.
Yes.
And she is leaving looking victorious and serene because she has the confidence of knowing that she owns her own property in her own right.
Of course.
She's no longer his chattel.
What do you think it is about this painting that appeals to you, that's had an enduring quality? Sometimes you find with works of art that they appeal to you at a certain time in your life, but as you get older, perhaps they don't have the same meaning. And yet you keep returning to this picture. So what is it about it? What qualities does it have that make it a great work?
Aside from the main dramatic action of the two characters, it is full of the most beautifully observed little still life elements and details.
Yes.
Things such as the finely constructed screen at the left of the painting. You know, it might just be the typical furnishing of a Victorian drawing room, but it could also be another psychological element that signals a divide that's happening between the couple. They are screening their emotions off from each other.
So
Is that a valid reading or is it not? This is what I love about great works of art, that base entry level, we're absorbed in a beautiful piece of painting, a wonderful narrative, even if we don't know what the story is.
Yes.
You're looking at a bravura piece of creativity in terms of draftsmanship, painting technique, colour selection and composition. But then the more you learn about both the artist and the narrative within the picture, you can go off on other journeys. So I like to think that great works of art are like a railway station.
Okay, yes.
And you can keep coming back to them, but each time you can take a different journey. It just depends upon which track you switch to.
Right.
And you might take track 1 on your first experience, track 23 years later in my case.
Yes.
This painting is a railway station that's full of possibilities. The painting is the starting point, and the journey that you take is where your mind chooses to go on any particular encounter with that painting. So it's a never-ending journey.
Ted, I think that that's probably a wonderful way to round off our interview today with that fascinating analogy, which certainly I can identify with, and I'm sure others will. But thank you for your time, your expertise, and your beautiful language.
A pleasure. Thank you, Susie.
Okay.